Hello, everybody, and welcome to the uTest Cloudspokes webinar, Unlocking the Power of Community and Development Testing. So we're gonna talk about both. We're going to talk about crowdsourcing, and we're going to talk about how it applies to both the development side of the equation and the testing side, and how these two integrate. Before we get started, I want to go over some logistics. Today, the webinar is being recorded, and for anyone that registered or is attending, we'll be sending out a link where you can go and view the recorded version if you miss any portion of today's webinar. On the right-hand side in GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar, you'll find a question box. Please feel free to submit any question you want. We're going to try and get to as many of them at the end of the webinar as possible. If you are having any technical difficulties, the best advice I can give is to try a different browser. We know that GoToWebinar works well with both Chrome, Firefox, and most versions of IE. And the Twitter hashtag for today's webinar is pound the CDLC, and we'll explain what that means as we go forward. Let's talk about who's presenting. My name is Damian Roskill. I'm the VP of Marketing here at uTest, and you can reach me at any time at droskill@utest.com. I'm pleased and honored to have joining us today Dave Messenger, who's the Chief Technology Officer for Cloudspokes. Say hi, Dave.
How you doing? And you can reach me as well as dave@cloudspokes.com. And just want to thank uTest for letting me come up to their offices today outside Boston. So as you probably can tell in this webinar, I have a bit of a Boston accent, so it's nice to be home in my home state today.
Anyway, let's talk a little bit about, we'll just spend a slide or two on each of the companies. So uTest is a software, for those that don't know, is a software app testing company, and we specialize in a specific type of testing that we like to call in-the-wild testing, and that's the ability to test your apps and applications in the environment that your end users actually consume them. So out in the wild, under various conditions, on various carriers, on endless devices, on endless versions of different operating systems. And to do this, we have over 80,000 testers from 190 countries around the world. And we've completed over 30,000 test cycles from small startups to enterprises, and we've done this across functional testing, load testing, security, localization, and usability. And the final component is we do this across mobile apps, web apps, and desktop apps. And I'll pass it over to Dave to talk about Cloudspokes.
Sure, thank you. Cloudspokes is really a community that's set up to connect businesses who need cloud mobile API development with a worldwide community of cloud experts. So we feel, as a CIO and Chief Marketing Officers look at the cloud as one of the growing areas that they need to tap into a wide range of experts to deliver their applications. So today we're about 74,000 members. We launch competitions to develop across all these platforms at cloudspokes.com, and usually you can see on average anywhere about 15 to 20 challenges ongoing on a weekly basis. So today, as we're going to get into the discussion, first we want to kind of talk a little bit about the software development lifecycle. So in the past, I'm sure everybody out there is familiar with this type of graph. It's very similar whether you're using waterfall or agile, that you're going through these types of processes, and you're doing it in, depending on what process you're in different intervals in time. We think that, as you bring in the crowd and the cloud, this type of software development lifecycle is going to have a little bit of a twist to it, and we'll go through that today. So as technologies change, really the model of delivery hasn't changed. One of the things that we found when the cloud first came to be is very easy to scale your applications, your infrastructure. With one command line, you can scale your Heroku instances 10x, or you can deploy an AMI to Amazon. It's very simple to get scale in your infrastructure. But at the same time, you're not able to find cloud-based resources, whether that's in development or that is in testing. You have to hire, plan, retain. It's very difficult to access top talent. So when you start looking at how apps are built today, when we looked at the previous software development lifecycle, it was very controlled. You had a project manager, very few people influencing the build out of those applications. With Agile, you try to bring your business users back into that fold, but still today, there's much more consumerization of IT. The crowd and your consumers have a much more powerful voice, whether it's through Twitter, cloud-based services where it's a very low switching cost. It's very important that you can hear your consumers and quickly build that into your application. And that's where we really think the crowd development lifecycle comes into play. No longer does your team have to reside all in one spot. They're able to contribute from all around the world. You can tap into experts wherever they may be. And tools are evolving in this space too. If you look at GitHub, social coding applications, there's ways that you can engage experts from around the world. And this is really what we want to be able to be doing on the development and testing side. And having that scale, an on-demand scale, you'll be able to fulfill the needs of your creators and consumers faster and easier than in the past. So when we look at moving from the traditional software development lifecycle to the crowd development lifecycle, we're really focusing on the bottom aspects of this graph and how we can speed up the development. So on the development side, we're really focused on giving you on-demand experts. So instead of having to worry about having a resource that might know how to implement MongoDB or JavaScript or AngularJS, and the next week knowing how to know Bootstrap, you can tie in the two experts through a crowd and community-based development model. And that's because as you're starting to build these applications, and you want to build them in high-quality micropods or distributed services and applications, you want to be able to leverage different platforms for the best of their ability. So you may want to leverage iPhone and build native apps. You may want to build a native Android app. Instead of being able to find resources that can do everything, you should be able to tap in and expand your development on aspects that you might need the extra scale on.
So, and the same sort of things apply on the actual test side. So, I'm actually going to talk about the second bullet point first here, which is, instead of talking about generalists in testing, we're talking about digging into people with specific domain experience in testing. So that could be across testing type, so functional versus security versus load, or it could be across platform, so testing on web, testing on Android, testing on iPhone. So you get a lot of the same benefit that Dave's talking about on the development side. You also get on the test side, and then beyond that, we also get to gain this real-world coverage. So this is something that you really can't duplicate it. We divide the world really into two areas. One is in the lab testing and out of the lab testing. And in the lab testing is great and an incredibly important part of everything that you're doing. But it's also never going to give you a complete picture of how your app is going to look, feel, and behave out there in the real world. And then the final benefit that we often see being utilized by people that are working with us is extending the workday around the clock. So basically chasing the sun, being able to end your day from a development standpoint, create a build, have that build tested overnight, and then come back in the morning and have a bunch of bugs sitting there waiting to be triaged by your development team. And we'll talk specifically about a case where we actually did this. So we like to talk about, with great power comes great responsibility. So the crowd and using the crowd can be incredibly powerful. But it's very important to realize that you can't simply just throw your app out to the crowd and expect that you're going to get a really great result. Because in addition to, just the volume of it, you're going to get a lot of different types of feedback, and so managing that takes some process. In order to scale like this in a seamless way, when you're adding the power of the crowd, that can be challenging, and that's really another benefit that companies like Cloudspokes and uTest provide is the management of this crowd on an ongoing basis. So, customers that are new to uTest will often find, for instance, that they're a little bit shocked and a little bit overwhelmed by the number of bugs that we deliver right in the beginning of a test cycle, maybe because they're not used to seeing that type of coverage. But it's also important to realize that crowds aren't homogeneous, and you can't treat them all the same way. And I'll talk about this a little bit more in the next slide. So, really, when you're working with the crowd, it's about turning this huge crowd of people, all with different specialties that are all working in isolation, into this, a well-orchestrated, band with every person organized, knowing what part they're supposed to play, and knowing how they fit into the whole. And that's really an important part of the value that crowdsourcing companies like uTest and Cloudspokes bring to the table. In terms of where we play, we often talk about here at uTest. We often talk about that. All crowds are not the same. All crowdsourcing companies aren't the same either. So, where I think what makes Cloudspokes and uTest different from a lot of the other companies out there is we really play above this line up in what we call expert sourcing. So it's really not about generalist activity. It's about very specific specialist types of activity. And also increasingly, and Dave, you can comment on this, but from our point of view, what we're seeing is the desire to recruit an actual skilled team that represents different components and bringing them together for a specific project.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Is both companies really provide that platform that gives you the ability to split those units of work up to the right people. So it not only is it really finding the right person, it's finding the right person at the right time, and then being able to combine that all back into a solution that is viable for the end consumer.
And on the uTest end, I'm sure it's the same on your end. We focus a lot on what we call white glove service, which is namely creating something that becomes an extension of your business that doesn't create endless overhead for you and actually brings value in terms of project management. So let me talk about what I consider to be, so I'm going to go through 4 essentials of the community development lifecycle as we're talking about here. The first one, independent thought through, is the lifeblood of creativity. So when I think about this, Dave and I were talking about this before, that it's that there's a limit to the amount of creativity that can really live within the 4 walls of an organization. The other limitation is time, which is that the same people working on the same project all the time, that limits the amount of creativity that they can bring to it just because they bring a certain viewpoint to it. And one of the great benefits of crowdsourcing models is that you get a constant, you can have that constant inflow and stream of new people with a new vision and new energy, so they don't get so that you continue to bring energy to your project. I think the second aspect is reputation, which is you have to engage with crowdsourcing platforms that have reputation at their core. And that means reputation. By reputation, I mean that we want to give the ability for the community to raise up their reputation over time, so basically show that they are the best, have a system for allowing people in the community to excel, and then making that very public so that it's very obvious to you as a buyer of these services. Using diversity to your advantage. We talked about this a little bit before, but having a crowd of 80,000 testers or 20,000 developers gives you that specialization that you can't get from normal outsourcing. If you went and talked to a traditional, for instance, testing outsourcing firm that's going to outsource to another country where you're going to have testers that are essentially in the lab but in a different country, you're not going to have a lot of diversity in that group. It's going to be fairly homogeneous. And then finally, you still call the shots. This is really important. You have to have it embedded in your process. And the places where we at uTest have seen it be most successful is the people that really embedded in their daily process. The people that bring, for instance, our PM or our technical team lead into their actual development meetings, so that they're on the same page. Also, in terms of integrating the actual systems themselves, so that right, uTest, for instance, can have bugs automatically flow into Jira if you're using Jira for bug tracking. Having that level of integration just makes the whole thing work a lot smoother. And I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that, if looking at the crowd as yet another sourcing aspect of your work. So I think if I was in the CIO's position, I would look at my portfolio of work and I would say there's a chunk that's going to go on my onshore team. There's going to be another part that's going to go to a dedicated offshore team of some sort, and then I think you should look at some percentage that's going to go to a crowd-based model. Whether that's testing, there's development, there's design and creativity. It's just another tool that should be included. And I think the key part of that, as you mentioned earlier, is that white glove service. Is having the ability to tap into, whether it's a uTest project manager, a Cloudspokes architect, a person that's basically going to represent your company to the community and act. We always say our architects are much more almost a part of the company they're working with than they are part of Cloudspokes. They're making sure that the community is being represented in the best way, being the ability to add to that client. So at the end of the day, though, you as the client are getting to call the shots on what is the output and what's the takeaways from the community.
And I think the other aspect of that that's really important is notice that neither one of us is talking about replacing any resources, right? It's about augmenting what you've already got. So, for instance, in uTest, we think that in the lab testing is very important, and that's core to the business. But the ability to scale out and get that real world, those real world inputs is just incredibly important.
Yeah, and that's something we've seen too. Is even whether it's been internally or with our clients, I think using the crowd gives a way for people to almost up-level their careers in some spots. Where now they're looking more, working with a business, they're doing more architecture and saying, here are all the pieces I need to get built. Or I'm working in testing, I'm going to send these pieces out to the community to do testing where they're really excellent at that, and I can add more business value in these ways. I think it's a great way for end consumers of the platforms to be able to add more business value and not have to work. None of us want to work those 80, 100-hour weeks, so you can add a lot of scale to your own work week.
So with that, Dave, you want to take us through the key takeaways?
Sure. So after this, we'll walk through a bunch of examples, but I think the key takeaways here is that really the software development lifecycle, it's evolving. Especially with the consumerization of IT, being able to listen to the crowd and the consumer, there's a voice. So you're going to have to be able to develop and implement things much faster than you have today. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is being able to add extra capacity on demand. And you should be able to do that. In order to do that, you have to be able to utilize the right resources and get high quality output. You should really be paying for it. And I think what's interesting in both our models is you're not really paying for all the effort that goes into doing something. You're paying for the quality output, which really is a different model. And then lastly is being able to use the crowd to the best of their ability and being able to get their creativity. So it's a difficult thing, and I think both our platforms do well, is you need to limit the creativity to get exactly what you want from an output, but at the same time, you don't want to stifle creativity. So it's a fine balance on how you use the crowd to get the right outputs, and that it works well for both the crowd and the end consumer.
So let's go into some of these examples.
Sure. So the first example we'll talk through is GlowCap. GlowCap is a premier search firm. It's really dedicated to find specialized recruiting needs. So Aperio is Cloudspokes' largest client, and they built a system for GlowCap, basically a public website portal. It needed to be able to support all versions of all browsers, Firefox, Chrome, Safari, Opera, even the old school Internet Explorers. And what was really interesting was we were able to build some of the front end pages through Cloudspokes, so the end client got a bunch of different looks and feels. We're able to implement a nice new front-end website, and at the same time, now we could really get scale by launching uTest to come in and find issues with our solution. So in this case, actually over a 3-day weekend, we were able to find 85 new bugs. And those could be anything from new bugs to specific browser instances. The second example we'll talk about is Virgin America. Virgin America used Cloudspokes to build some global search capabilities in here. But we also used uTest in this case to test the system. So for this particular application, they had 2,700 users across different airports and their headquarters, and they needed to build a responsive design. So we needed to be able to test as many devices as possible. Just like Damien was saying earlier, where we are not a replacement, in this case, Aperio did a lot of the configuration development. Cloudspokes was able to augment that with specific on-demand expertise. The uTest community was actually able to augment our QA department. We actually have a QA department that was focused on iPod, iPad, and Android testing, but really 3 different versions of that. And we were able to ramp up a team through uTest that covered over 25 different devices and browsers. So that really gave us the confidence that we could catch everything prior to release, and again, shrink in our timelines. In this case, uTest community logged over 67 different issues. Another example is the Academy of Art University, which is a for-profit university in San Francisco. We actually do a bunch of work with them with Cloudspokes around a private community for them. We also have built a mobile campus app to allow their students to track buses and schedules and be able to move across the city of San Francisco to their different campus locations. I think that this was pretty unique because, again, when we wanted to go to a testing approach, we were able, again, to reach out to uTest, find resources almost on every Android, across all the manufacturers, OS versions, iPhones, again, with OS versions, and we're able to exploratory test all that functionality across that disparity of devices. The other interesting piece here was it was dependent upon location-based services, so we were able to come up with a way to still have people test inside of San Francisco, even though they were all over the world. So we were able to still leverage that around-the-clock testing, access a crowd of people, and get a lot of work done. I think what's interesting in the 3 cases I talked about was that it was basically because of the variety of devices, browsers, operating systems, it really becomes impractical, if not impossible, to get sufficient test coverage. But being able to use a single uTest coverage, we're then able to reach out to those 30 different browsers, devices, operating systems, and be able to uncover these issues in a week, 2 weeks, versus, think about our QA team. If we had to scale to that size, we wouldn't be able to do that quickly. And if we had to do a dedicated team, now you're talking about a QA cycle that's going to last months instead of a week or 2. So it really gives us a lot of extra scale. And lastly, I know just to talk a little bit about us, so from a Cloudspokes perspective, we actually have rebuilt our site. We rebuilt our site through the community. We actually had the Cloudspokes community build the site from scratch for us once we got to a critical mass. And we were able to build that across a series of challenges. You can see we had 44 different users from 12 different countries build it. What was interesting was we were able to tie into uTest, and we actually went into our first uTest test cycle over Thanksgiving. So literally on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, we launched a uTest cycle, I think it was 88 bugs, and we actually built a little automated system to take those bugs, load them up into Cloudspokes as what we call tasks, which are small fixes. Give our Cloudspokes community access to our code base to clean up the code, fix the bugs, and deliver those changes. And the community worked kind of in tandem with the testing team across Thanksgiving. So myself and Jeff Douglas, our chief architect of the platform, was able to still enjoy our turkey without any bugs, both figuratively and literally, around being able to tap into both communities. If you think about it, it gave us huge scale. And Jeff was able to rebuild the site. We just did another redesign of the site, and he's a one-person team that, because of the scale he can get using the testing community and using the community itself, he can build and test software at a rate of, I would say, a pretty large R&D team would need to be able to be built in order to reach the same capacity that Jeff does for us internally at Cloudspokes.
It starts to feel like magic after a little while, right? That you do the design, you've got it hooked up to uTest, the defects come back, they become automatic small tasks, it all gets fixed. I mean, it feels like a self-healing machine almost.
Yeah.
You know, those are three. Was that three or was that four? I can't remember.
Four good examples.
Sorry, four great examples of different of us working together. Thanks for walking through those. So I think from here we're just going to go right into the Q&A portion. We'll try and get to as many questions as we can. I'm just going to start reading through them. So let's see. Is it difficult to reproduce defects uncovered in the wild? So that's a great question. And the way that we do that is, you know, given the size of our community with over 80,000 testers, we've got enough people that generally we can find a similar enough user with a similar platform to verify and validate the issue. So that's generally our approach there.
And I think, you know, as a consumer of the uTest service, what's great about it is the testers, in the way uTest has set up their incentives, is they have it so that testers we have to accept the bug to be a valid bug, and that's how the testers get rewarded. So what's great about that is we're able to, they incent the testers to provide great documentation, reproducible steps, videos, screenshots. So it's really helpful from a developer standpoint of being able to say, oh, here's a bug, let me look at it. And what's even, I think, more important is they even have the community triage these bugs originally, so they remove duplicates, they remove things that might not be a bug. So you're really only looking at the cream of the crop of found tests.
Thanks for giving all that great feedback. Preventing me from covering it. Okay, so let's see. Do you interface with other backtracking software? I'll just go through this briefly. The question. Jira, Bugzilla, Mantis, Rally, Microsoft TFS, Redmine, and we also have the ability to export via an API. So just to whack through that quickly. I'm going to go to this question next just because it's particularly appropriate with Dave in the room. What are the main differences between Cloudspokes and Topcoder?
You know, from a Cloudspokes perspective, we're really focused on cloud, mobile, and API. We are hyper-focused on our main areas, so we really only launch challenges in those areas. The other piece, I think, is we are looking at a little bit, because of the nature of the cloud platforms and the work we're doing, we produce software in a little bit different manner. So we don't have the UML. You know, Topcoder does a phenomenal job of doing engineering discipline development. So they're doing really great UML diagrams, engineering software, you know, following design into development. We tend to be more of, hey, we know this is going on this cloud platform. Here's a way of being able to develop on that cloud platform. So it's a little bit different model on how we actually run our competitions.
Okay, great. I'm just going to knock this one out quickly. There's a question of, will you be sharing the content by any chance? And the answer is yes. We're going to make both recording of this available, and we're also going to make the slides available. And we'll email after the webinar, we'll email out a link. So look for that. Let's see. So the next question is, do end clients get to interact directly with the testers? The answer is yes, absolutely. And it's really up to the client to determine the level of interaction that they want to have with the testers. In other words, some clients we work with, they want us to essentially manage the process and manage the interaction using one of our project managers. But if the client wants to get in there and wants to ask a question or follow up on a bug with a particular tester, they absolutely can do that. And I don't know if you want to answer it from the Cloudspokes side.
Yeah, we do the same thing.
Yeah.
So we provide an architect to our end clients, and it kind of becomes a little bit of making the sausage, right? We love to have our people in there, the clients in there interacting directly with the community, but if they just care about getting quality results, to them it's no different if they're using a crowdsourced model or they're using an offshore or onshore model. We just produce the end results for them. But we encourage them to get as involved in the community as possible. We think it's a great interaction both for the community and for the end consumer.
Yeah, and we both offer SaaS-based platforms for doing that interaction. So what are the mechanics of soliciting crowd input? So you want to take that one first?
Sure. I mean,
mechanics is a little bit tough.
Yeah, we do a lot of different things. So we have forums. We also run a discussion thread on every one of our challenges. So anyone participating in the challenge can go back and forth with either the architect or the end consumer running that challenge. We have overall forums, Twitter. We go back and forth with people. We actually even run Google Hangouts every 3 weeks where people can interact directly with the team. We track all of our, as Damien mentioned before, it's very important from reputation. So from a mechanical standpoint, we track stats on all of our competitions and on our members. I'm trying to think. I hope that kind of covered the.
Yeah, I mean, we use similar kind of mechanics. So we've got forums. We've got a live chat that's constantly going so that people can interact with the testers. In terms of the mechanics of soliciting, generally a test cycle is put out, testers apply to be a part of the cycle. If they match against a preliminary profile that's already set up with us, I'm sure it's pretty similar for you guys.
Yeah.
Then they join, they start participating, and as they're participating, we're giving them feedback on the quality of their bugs and the quality of their output in near real time, right? So as they file a bug, we'll say, that's a great bug or that. Also, we have customers. The customer interaction is in there too, because they're in there providing feedback on the quality of the bugs as well. And our testers are incentivized by they get paid more for providing a bigger, higher value bug find, basically. So.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things you mentioned there, Damien, is that people self-select for these units of work too, right? They apply for the cycle, they apply to work on the challenge. So if I am a community member, I think it's very important that I want to work what I want to work on. And maybe it's technologies I want to learn. So the mechanics that empower a person to decide what they want to work on, the transparency is all very key to making a good relationship with the community.
All right, so let's take this one. This is a good one. How do you deal with IP protection and security? And the example that the person gives is a banking app.
Yeah, so and we deal with IP and security all the time. We have the capability of, curating our community, if you will, so we can run open challenges to anyone. We can run NDA challenges or background check challenges and shrink the community based on that. So we slice and dice the community based on the concerns or the needs of the end client. But from an IP perspective, the majority of our challenges that we run, the IP is transferred to the sponsor of that challenge. So we do run some that are open source, but the majority, the IP is transferred to the client. And from a Cloudspokes and consumer standpoint, we contractually work with our clients to come around to the IP indemnification and other concerns around IP. But it's an issue that comes up frequently and often that we've been able to tackle plenty of times with clients.
For us, it's not generally about IP protection and transfer so much as just privacy, somewhat IP protection. But the important part is that all of our testers are under non-disclosure. They're all under NDA. And then in addition to that, we can push a specific NDA to our tester community that is individualized for a particular client. So we'll, we can, as Dave says, shrink the community down that way, and then also put further protections in place so that the client feels a good amount of protection.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we do the same thing. Like I said, how we shrink it down is we push an NDA. We actually use DocuSign. So it's kind of the nice thing of being in the crowd and the cloud is now you no longer even have to send paper documents around to be able to filter out that community.
Okay, next question. Do you guys work together exclusively? Does working with one automatically get you the other? The answer is that is no, we work individually. We're partners and we work particularly well together, I think. So it's a great combination, but if you're interested in working with either one of us, that works as well.
Yeah, and we do run a lot of projects where we use uTest. Especially from the Cloudspokes side, we believe in the crowdsourcing model fully. So we try to use other communities as well to fulfill client requests. And uTest we feel is right now the best testing platform out there. So we use it a fair amount on our clients.
How do you determine the number of testers required for a test cycle? Pretty simple. It's really determined by the client need in order to get the appropriate amount of test coverage. So, if a client comes to us and says they need coverage across 30 devices and X number of operating systems, that's obviously going to require a bigger tester group than we would have before. So I'm getting a note. Oh, is that PM? We'll come back to that. But the PM also, I think what the note I'm being handed is just to tell me that the PMs, of course, add and manage that process. Thanks for that. Let's see. Does this work better for big companies or small companies? You want to talk about that first?
Sure. It's a good question. We definitely focus more on the enterprise model, but we do work with smaller companies. We have some startups, actually one that was just out at demo where they actually built their whole product using the Cloudspokes model. One of the things, depending on how much resources you need, it really works well for us if you need dedicated architecture support to have work for a bigger company, because we can then staff it with a full-time resource. If the client's more on the technical side and they can help launch the challenges and fulfill more of the architecture work, that allows us to scale down a little bit to the smaller companies. But it's something we're constantly working on is improving, just like we talked earlier about consumerization IT, is we constantly have to make sure our interface is improving, our ability to empower more people to use the crowd. So we're constantly looking to push that level down further and further, provide more services to smaller companies.
For us, I mean, we work with small startups, in the 1 to 10 people range, and we work all the way up to the biggest enterprise. One of the benefits of working with uTest is just the scalability. So, some of the companies that have started with us started very small and have now grown, and and they grow in multiple ways, not just in the number of people in the company, but the number of apps that they're delivering across the number of platforms. And so as these companies roll out, they decide, they were only iPhone, now they want to move to Android. That's a significant investment for them from a testing perspective to support the Android platform, and we can help them scale to that. And then on the large enterprises, we work with some very big enterprise clients, and they like the ability, again, to be scalable as well and to scale up and down as they need. So across the board. Let's see, we've just got time for a couple more. So I'm going to grab this one. It says, let's see, it says, I was distracted for a few minutes, so it sounds to me like you're talking primarily about functional testing. How do you coordinate load testing activities as well as gather data collected by the load testers? So, we can organize, so we do a specific type of load testing that we like to call hybrid load testing. And hybrid load testing consists of both doing a high volume load test using automated software and at the same time bringing in a crowd of testers to work on the site while it's under heavy load. And the idea there is that you can get a real sense for how your site is actually going to behave and feel when it's under load that you can't necessarily get just from automated testing, where you're just going to really find out if it breaks or succeeds at load. So I think it's a pretty unique offering.
Yeah, and that's something we actually will run some automation engineering. So that would be more around creating test scripts, like Selenium, Cucumber, different types of JMeter testing scripts. And then, we'll augment it with uTest to do the more functional testing. So that actually, I wasn't familiar with you guys doing the actual
Yeah, we do that. And then we also offer usability, localization, and security testing. Let's see, we've got time for one more question, and then let's see, then we got to let Dave go, which is, I want to find one that's more oriented to him.
I might have one question too when we're done.
Yeah, okay.
I'll ask you while you're looking for it. I think one of the other unique models with Cloudspokes is we produce, because of the nature of having to break things down into micro work, we actually produce assets. So we use those assets that might be deployed at one client, and we use it at several different clients. So that helps improve quality because we're reusing code. And I think it's interesting, we actually have not used it yet, but I know uTest now has a couple apps and more reusable assets that people can use to augment their testing. I don't know if you want to, as a customer, I know I'm just getting familiar with it. Maybe talk a little bit about the AppHance or the other
sure.
other products.
So AppHance is a mobile SDK that can be integrated into your mobile app and automatically provides crash reporting and crash and app analytics about your app as it's out there, whether it's in testing or out there in the wild in production environment. And what's interesting about this is, when we've got this integrated and then you integrate it with the sense of community, then the community can actually use the tool to facilitate and speed up reporting of bugs, particularly on mobile apps. So as an example, with AppHance, one of the things you can do is if you find a bug in an app, you can just shake the phone. If you enable this in the instrumentation, the SDK, you can just shake the phone and it'll do a screenshot, and then you can actually draw on the screen and then write in the bug, and that goes right into the uTest queue. And then we've also launched on the other side of it, we've launched a tool really more oriented towards product teams and marketers, which is called Applause. And Applause is about measuring the sentiment, how people feel about your app out in the real world. So what we're doing there is we're pulling 90 million or so reviews from the public app stores, and we're analyzing that using natural language processing and coming up with a score for how users actually feel about your app, and we track that over time. We've covered that in a past webinar. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on it, but you can go check it out at applause.com, and it's free right now. So I encourage, if you're an app developer, if you've got an app in the market, just go there and check it out and see how it goes. The last question I wanted to give to Dave is, I understand how testers are compensated. What's the reward model for developers?
So in our model, a couple different ways. Is we usually pay first and second prize money, sometimes third place, all the way down. So we get bonuses out. But when a competitor comes and they compete, they submit their unit of work. The unit of work actually goes through some automated tools to check for code quality, check for security holes, and then it's delivered to a team of people that look at the code and fill out a scorecard. So you get a peer review. So you actually learn from other competitors and other developers. What's neat about that is, even if you submit a unit of work, we actually open up the submissions for the other participants. So you can look at anyone else that also participated on that code, see their scorecards, see what they did. So it's a great way, we think it's a great way for people to learn new technologies, learn from each other, and learn from the peer review board, in addition to getting prize money. We also give out points and badges, so you can kind of build a public profile with badges and points. And at some point, I think we'll come up with some different considerations and prizes around those around the transferring those points into some form of currency.
And we, in terms of the way uTest compensates, we compensate based on either if it's exploratory testing, it's a slightly different model than if it is test case execution, where people are executing against actual test cases. So slightly different models there, but similar. We use, there's a lot of focus on reputation and making sure that the testers are also building reputation, have the opportunity, because that has a lot of value for the testers, because it gets them more work. So with that, you want to go back to the first slide just so people have our contact information?
Sure.
So while Dave brings that up, I just want to again put that up. Okay, I just want to, Dave, thanks again for coming in and spending the time with us. It's been great to learn more about Cloudspokes. and I just really want to thank everybody for participating. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. So, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Damien or I, and I'd love to talk to anyone. Or Twitter is another great way to get a hold of us as well.
Okay, that's great. Thanks again to everybody, and we'll talk to you again in the future. Thanks.